Welcome, everybody, to this week's show of the British Electric Blues show. And we look forward to the show this evening because it's Simon's part 2 of his British Blues top 5 albums. We're sorry that there's been a delay for the last couple of weeks, but we'll talk about the reason why we've had those delays during the show. But without any delay, here he is, my friend and co-host all the way from the UK, Simon.
Because I don't have one of those sound machines. Good morning.
Awesome. I'm going to enjoy looking back on this rerun of the show to see how that intro video worked out.
Yeah. And me sitting in the corner going, like a little rodent eating something.
I've got to be careful. I've got to be careful with the music because, I don't want to get black flagged for us, our show or anything like that. So my intention is to just do a couple of riffs. But as you know, YouTube now can put some disclaimers on 12 bar.
Anything. What according to what Dave's thing? Yes, I got a flag for not playing AC/DC. Well, yeah. Do you see that video?
Weird, isn't it? Weird.
Do you see that video?
Yeah.
He said,
yeah. We spoke about it on the show.
AC/DC. That's really funny.
yeah. When he was when he was with me last week, we spoke about that, and it's one of the pet peeves that he's had over the years, and that's why he had to go through and re-edit his Peter Green tutorial videos because they were up there for about 3 years. No one gave a damn about them until his channel started growing, and then all of a sudden they put claims on his videos, so he had to go through and re-edit them, which is
they noticed, yeah. Well,
it's a good thing for guitar players because at least we get those awesome videos. But just a little bit. Anyway, we don't want to talk about that because we've got no control over it. Really,
I'd like to say good morning, Arvin.
G'day, Arvin.
Staunchest supporter. Good morning. How are you? Hope you're good.
Yeah. So I had some good feedback from some of our regular guests over the last couple of weeks with the installment of the videos that we're doing. Hanging out for you to get to your second one because the way that we're going on, this series is going to go to Christmas.
and on, yes.
Good to hang out though with Kubrick. To be fair, we had promised Kubrick to jump on for a couple of weeks, hadn't we?
It was really good to have him on. He's really interesting. Yeah. It's just not, a different perspective is always, as I keep saying to you, everyone's got a story. Everyone's got and it's, I think it's good for people to come on, and kind of say, yes, Arvin, I'm talking about you.
Well, talking about people coming on, we're lucky that we're going to have Guitar Hack joining us this time next week.
Fantastic.
Now, the reason why we're going to get Guitar Hack is the album I was going to talk about was the Blues Breakers album, but we've discussed that at length on a lot of these shows, Simon. So I thought what I'll do is I'll get Guitar Hack on and let's talk about our journeys over the years and trying to get that Blues Breaker sound ourselves. We've spoken about how other artists and how Eric Clapton and Peter Green got through this sound themselves, but the fact that Hack is a Marshall man and he's got a few Gibsons there, I'm sure he'll have some interesting stories to tell us. So that looks and should be a good show.
That'd be really good. Yes. Good morning, Kubrick Lover. Talking of Kubrick Lover, there he is. He says he's bought Guitar for Dummies. Let us know how you get on. I don't know anything about those. I mean, I've seen a lot of those whatever for Dummies books, but I've never come across one before. Have you ever looked at one? No, I mean, I haven't looked at any of those. whatever for
no.
dummies. Computer programming for dummies. It's beyond me. Too much of a dummy.
No, I just take a shortcut and jump on YouTube and just Google YouTube, and there's a video on there and
how to do it.
How to do it.
A bit, yeah. That's true. I've repaired quite a lot of phones and stuff like that using YouTube videos.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to have our Marshalls and our Gibsons plugged in next week. So
I've got a week to get one.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting because talking to Hack over the years, how he's progressed down that road too of getting that British blues sound, some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes we've made, and maybe some examples or some experiences that people can probably avoid along the way. So I look forward to that.
Oh, I'll get out my gold guitar with the Peter Green mod on it.
Yeah, awesome.
The coil tapping Peter Green mod that it has. That'd be fun.
Thanks for hanging out with us last week, Kubrick Lover. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm a dummy replacing the bridge right now. Arvin's doing some technical work on his guitars. That's brave, Arvin. That is. I'd normally take it to the man and get him to do it because I'm a chicken.
Yeah, I've picked up a little bit over the last couple of years. I've sort of pushed myself, Simon. I've been a little bit like you too. Like there's a few things that I've tried, like setting up my Floyd Rose. I've sort of managed to do those by accident.
Really, that's it. That looks reasonably. I don't complicated. Is the wrong word, but it's obviously 3 or 4 steps you have to take to do it. Yes.
Yeah.
To kind of in the right order and do the right things to enable it to work properly.
I do it my way. I don't do it anybody else's way on any of the videos.
There's a new YouTube video, Walton's Way.
Yeah. I don't block it. I just what I do is I tune the 2 inside strings. What are they? D and G. I tune D and G first, tighten that up, and then
go work
and then go out.
And go A and B.
Guitar Hack.
And then there he is. Good morning, Guitar Hack. Looking forward to having you on next week.
Yeah.
It'll be good fun.
Yeah. We've just told everybody to plug their Marshalls in and their Les Pauls.
I'll be really popular in my house at 6:30 a.m. With my cranked Marshall with my PV Delta Blues up to 7.
Yeah.
I can see the neighborhood enjoying that.
I look forward to at least Guitar Hack sharing those experiences, Simon. Some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes, some of the lessons that we've learnt over the years. Because chasing that Beano tone isn't a cheap exercise, but there are some ways that you can get about doing that. So I look forward to sharing that. I picked up a couple of tips over the years, especially from Dave, who was on the show last week with us. He's the guitar he's just using the vintage brand Les Paul, which is only here in New Zealand. It's only $700. So it's pretty cheap. How much? $700. It's a cheap guitar, but it's got that pedigree mod.
It's got the thing. Hack says, Marshall and Les Paul, I know a guy. You certainly do. I like Arvin says, I've done a bunch of crazy stuff during the lockdown. I'm recklessly emboldened since figuring out how to solder. Anything that doesn't move in his metal will be soldered in Arvin's house.
But you're right, Hack. Marshall and Les Paul. When I was thinking about how I could talk about my experience, I thought that's going to be pretty boring because I've only got a year's worth of experience of playing a Marshall and a Les Paul. You've got a few years up your sleeve, so you've got a few more examples that you can share with us. So, yeah, we look forward to it.
Arvin is the Marquis de Sade. Not a Marquis de Sade, but yes, nice one. That's good. Well done. I like that. Arvin. That's very good. Yeah,
he was on fire last week too.
Yeah, because you've only just got yours, haven't you? So you're kind of still working your way through it, or have you arrived at the point? Are you still trying to work it out a bit?
Oh well, I'm going to talk about 20 years of the progress that I've had of buying, less expensive Gibson type guitars and other amps to try and get that tone. So yeah, I look forward. We won't preempt and talk about that now, but there's a couple of examples that I can share that I'd like to leave with anyone else that thinks that maybe chasing that tone's worth it. But we all know that Guitar Hack certainly has that experience. He's the tone king when it comes to Marshalls and Gibsons.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah,
you see, this is where I'm going to disagree with Guitar Hack.
Go on.
I totally disagree with you, Hack. I had the Origin 50 head, and I could not get anywhere near. I must have had a dud. I couldn't get the Beano tone from that head. It frustrated me. So, but we'll talk about that next week. Maybe it was a dud.
Yeah.
Anyway,
there's all sorts of ways of doing it. Turn the tone all the way down, all the way up. This and the bass bit. Thing. Right. So my second record. this is going. Yeah, as you say, we're going to finish this by Christmas. So my second record is Roll of the Drums, please. See if you can guess what it is. Can you guess what it is yet?
Yeah, I know. England's greatest hit makers. Gotta be. What an album.
Look at that. What a cover. Did I say what a cover? Yes, indeed. Voici maintenant.
Oh my gosh.
Voici
look at the back.
The Rolling Stones. Let's turn around. Look at the back.
Look at that.
Look at that. Mean, moody, and magnificent. Like they were told to be.
Can we have a look at the portraits, Simon? Can you? Yeah.
I'm in trouble. I can't see where I am. Oh dear, that's funny.
That's when they were handsome, Simon.
Yeah. Do you think they were ever classically handsome?
Oh.
Ryan, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I feel that they were. I don't wish to diss people, of course, but I don't know whether I think that they're necessarily completely sort of handsome. So there we are. This is one of my favourite records. I love this record. It's a fantastic. It's got a verve and a swing to it that I really like. It's a bit like a sort of, in a weird kind of way, it's got that same kind of energy as the sort of punk records, but obviously not punk. Oh, he's going to get something useful. So, a bit of history. Obviously it's on Decca Records. It says so on the front there. It's Decca had obviously missed out on signing the Beatles, and so apparently one of the things I didn't realise is that so they gave the Rolling Stones a recording contract. But the band got 3 times the new act's typical royalty rate, full artistic control of recordings, and ownership of the recording master tapes.
Wow.
Which must be almost unheard of in those days, mustn't it? I can't imagine. I've never heard of it in the Beatles, certainly didn't. Good morning, Great Manzini.
Hey, Great Manzini.
It did. Great Manzini. It did look different. It was did have slightly different tracks on it as well, I think as well. But but they can you think? I mean, certainly the Beatles never had that sort of thing, did they? They didn't have that sort of deal with what are they called? I've forgotten what record label they're on. It's gone.
EMI, Parlophone.
It's Parlophone. That's it. But so they didn't have that. So I was quite amazed to find out that that they, and I think probably that's a bit of Andrew Loog Oldham in there, isn't it? The proto manager before
man.
people like
Smart man.
Well, yeah, but but also interested in getting the best for the but also being new at it, but then not really realizing that about management, learning as he was going along, doing it, and therefore having bolder, less record type ideas and stuff. But so yeah, it's that was my first thing. So they also were allowed to use non-Decca recording studios. So they didn't have to use the Decca recording studios that we talked about where the Beano album was recorded. So they used Regent Sounds studios, which had egg boxes on the ceiling. Do you remember that? When you're soundproofing in the 70s, you could put egg boxes on the ceiling, which apparently deadened all the sound and made it all.
Ingenuity.
Yeah. It's and of course they recorded it pretty much live. So they all sort of in a room together. 1, 2, 3, 4, off you go. And Andrew Loog Oldham said that Regent Sounds had leaked instrument to instrument in the right way, creating a wall of sound that worked well for the band. But and it was pretty cheap. It was pretty cheap to record there, so they spent some time in there doing it. And of course the cover as well. Can you imagine, Andrew? Can you think of an album before this one that doesn't have the name of the band on it?
No.
Your first album, and obviously but with not the name of the group on it. Just so I'm going to use the word iconic sleeve, with them standing there. So it's sort of, amazing kind of sort of statement, really, of the intent of the band. Thank you. Yes, I try and keep my records in good condition. It's not an original. I mean, it is reasonably original, but it's not. They had originally one of the, which track is it? Originally, there was a sort of short release of, I think, it had a longer version of one of the tracks on it, and they released it, and then they redid it so that they so it went back. It came from a 4-minute song to a 2-minute song. I can't remember this. So it was recorded in Regent Street Sounds in London over the course of 5 days in January, February '64, and obviously most of the tracks are covers. They're mostly blues covers, pretty much. Two songs credited to the first appearance of Nanka Fledge, the pseudonym for group compositions from '63 to '65, and interesting. I didn't know this. I don't know what I was doing, but Phil Spector and Gene Pitney both contribute to the recording sessions and are referred to as Uncle Phil and Uncle Gene in the subtitled Nanka Fledge instrumental "Now I've Got a Witness." So and some of Graham Nash and Alan Clark from the Hollies contributed backup vocals to it, which I'd forgotten as well. Blimey, so for me, a really great, British blues, certainly said where the Rolling Stones came from, what they were doing, was that the sort of curators of that blues tradition. I also think I'd say about it that it's a different thing, I think, too, because for me, because it has Chuck Berry on it, for starters, that it kind of has, it has, obviously Lawrence Daniel songs and Willie Dixon songs. It's kind of like has more rock and roll on it than straight blues. I don't know if you agree with that, but that listening to it, that's my kind of feeling about it. Is that it has a kind of rock and roll thing in it that doesn't kind of that doesn't kind of quite. It means it's not quite the same as, say, the Beano album. It's a bit earlier, but it's not quite as sort of, in an odd way, And I always think of Keith Richards as being a rock and roller more than I think of being a blues guy for some reason. I know he loves the blues, and I know he plays it, but I always think of him at the heart as being like a rock and roller, as being more Chuck Berry than Muddy Waters. Do you think that's that? Is that any credence or not? It just kind of struck me listening to it that it seemed to be more of that than maybe some other people. But.
Well, I think you're right. That first album, it's a landmark. It's an exclamation mark. It's the foundation of where the British blues movement was going to go over the next 5, 6, maybe 7 years. That album is Brian Jones's album, isn't it? So that's a classic example of that weaving guitar sound. When people say, we want to hear some weaving, you're not going to hear it. And we've mentioned this before on a lot of shows. You're not going to hear that with Mick Taylor when he was in Stones. You clearly had a rhythm and you clearly had a lead distinction happening there between the two guitar players. But certainly on that album, you can hear the weaving, and it's very hard really to sort of make a distinguish between the two guitar players. And I think Carl went through. And I think he's to do that, Simon. I think that was one of his homework things that he was going to do a couple of years ago on a show with us, do some research and try and work out, according to the interviews and books and all that, who played the guitar on what part, on some songs.
Yeah.
But look, I'm not going to disagree with you. Certainly, when you think of Keith Richards, it's rock and roll, and
when you think of Brian Jones, it's a blues thing, isn't it? So you've got the two things. Yeah,
I'm a King Bee, which obviously is a standout with Mick Jagger's vocals. But I'm going to say a very democratic album. Now, I haven't read a lot about it recently to know the ins and outs, but the reason why I say democratic is because I think it's a resemblance of the individuals of that band, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've got the rock and roll side, and the rock and roll tradition that Keith is going to follow down, because you've said too many times he was a Chuck Berry nut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's a landmark. It's a fantastic album, and that was their set too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Pretty much, yes, absolutely. Pretty much their live set, as a common with a lot of groups. You hone your set live before you ever record, so that So when you go in the studio. And I think it certainly befits those kind of live recording sort of situations that you do, where you go in and play as a band. If you've been playing it for 2 years or whatever, 2 years, that actually you're really tight. And what we could say about it is they're tight. That gives you a real advantage. So what you do is you go and you record your live set in a studio setting, and see how it goes. And especially in those kind of live-ish, you recorded live. That's how it works.
Well, and they even
I think it gives it an energy and a verve and a zip, doesn't it? Yeah.
Now I've got a witness. It's just fantastic. Do we need to? Hey, Mitch, do we need to talk about the solo that was released separately from the album? Because I think I think if you're going to talk about the album, you have to talk about Little Red Rooster, don't you?
Well, you mean as part of it, but not actually
Yes.
released as part? Yeah, yeah. Is it on the second album, Little Red Rooster? Is it on the second one, or is it? I thought I'm obviously not on here, but that's fine. I can't remember, to be honest. But
I thought it was. I thought it was one
so
of the
many
singles.
things.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
No. That's right. I mean, it's you know, the second album. Yeah, let's find the second album a second. So we can. In the meantime, there's a couple of questions. I think Kubrick Lover says the guy who sings "Long Cool Woman in Black Dress" from the Hollies. That's him, Kubrick Lover. Do I own 45 records as well? I do own more than 45 records. It's the joke, but no, I've got a box of singles. I'll dig them out one day and be. They are. I've got a bit of an esoteric because I worked in a record shop for 3 years, so I have. I've got a sort of I worked from 79 to 82 in a record shop, so I've got quite a lot of. Morning, Mickey Settlemire. How you doing? Hope you're good. Kubrick Lover. I don't own the UK. I don't own the US version. This is a UK version that I obviously bought from the record shop. It's still got a bit of sticky stuff up there from the sticky price tag we would have put on it. So I obviously got this when I worked in a record shop. So it's a Decca mono record. So it's one of the. I don't think there's not a stereo version of it. But you're right. Just looking at this, I just got the second one up. There is no Little Red Rooster on it. So Little Red Rooster is a single on its own. That's quite interesting. I didn't realise that. But yes, you're very much a piece with certainly the first album, isn't it? And it could have been on there, couldn't it? The British records back then, had a tradition of releasing singles, didn't they? That were separate from the albums. But a landmark album. Interesting that that first album, you can see clearly those defined roles that the band members were going to have early on. Now it might sound like a cliche, Simon. Of course Mick Jagger is the vocalist and he's going to continue being the vocalist, but everything that Mick Jagger was during that classic Rolling Stones period is on that first album, where he's putting on a different voice on those songs. None of those songs sound the same. No. What, as if he's trying out different voices a bit?
Yeah.
To work out what he's doing. Yeah. It's sorry, just looking at this. Obviously, Little Red Rooster is a blues standard written by Willie Dixon, but not recorded. I didn't know. It's not recorded until 1961. It was only first recorded in 61 by Howling Wolf.
Yep.
And they obviously took that slide guitar and Sam Cooke did a version of it. But yeah, I didn't realise it was a kind of, yes, you think of a blues standard as being pushed back a bit further than that, don't you? Not in that thing.
And the only British blues #1 song ever.
Pretty much, yeah.
And 12 bar. The only
bar
#1
blues,
12 bar blues song.
Well, yes, that's true. Well, not the only 12 bar. I'm sure Status Quo would argue with that a bit. They probably had some #1 songs that were based 12 bar blues, but not quite the same thing. I'll give you that for sure. But, yeah, interesting that. But yes, and it could have. I'm surprised. Nobody seems to have done that, do they? Nobody seems to have put Little Red Rooster on the first album. Because normally, quite often what happens is they get put on, don't they, later? They add them in as a kind of addendums or whatever, don't they, when they redo them?
I think they released it on a couple of collections, but if you look at the Beatles, for example, as a model too, they released a lot of singles that were lead-ins to the album, to keep something ticking over until the album was released. But definitely a British thing there for a long time. Singles released separately from the album, and I kind of think, Simon, it put a lot of pressure too on the bands, because if it was a shit hot single, well then it had to be a shit hot album,
Yeah, well, yeah, and and you kind of go, if you're going to look at it, you might shove off one of the weaker tracks and put that on instead, because it's such a strong song.
So who picked the who picked the songs for that album? Was it Andrew, or did Nick
I
and
think
Keith have it?
I think Andrew's vision, but I think I don't know who did particularly, but I think that his self belief in the band. I mean, I hadn't realised that the famous story about them being locked in the kitchen and told not to come out without a song, which of course is "Tell Me." So I thought it was something like later on, but I didn't realise it was quite so early. It's that things I forget. But yes, that was the song where they famously got locked in the kitchen and told not to come out and left until they had a song, and that was "Tell Me." And that was Andrew Loog Oldham saying, and I think that because they'd "I Want to Be Your Man," obviously, which is the Beatles, John and Paul had written that, it occurred to them, so if you write your own songs, that's a good idea. So obviously, took that and got them to do some work.
Yeah, I think what really happened there is Mick and Keith saw Paul and John write that song. They sat there. They were sitting there, whatever, having a cigarette or a beer or a cup of tea that they were doing, and saw them write that song. And that was the first time, obviously, that they'd been around songwriters, and they thought, holy cow, these guys just whacked that song out in 10, 15 minutes, Simon. So they'd been thinking about it a little bit beforehand. I think the fact that Andrew Loog Oldham, I think he's sort of urbanized that myth a little bit, that I'm responsible. I am the one responsible for those. Certainly, he was a catalyst in making sure that this band, for them to progress, they had to write songs, which is interesting because we've done a couple of shows in the past. I've done them with with Carl, but I don't know if I've asked you this question. Why did Andrew pick? Did Andrew pick Keith and Mick? Do you think, or why did he sideline Brian, because he was clearly the leader of the band?
That's a good question. Why? Because he didn't. I don't know. I don't know why he sidelined Brian and chose Mick and Keith. Maybe he thought, obviously, that I could see the Mick, that you could see Mick, couldn't you? Because the lead singer writes the lyrics, kind of thing. That's how it works. But why he chose Keith rather than, because even then Keith had more kind of, was more of a kind of rhythm guitarist, had his chops down in a different way than Brian, who's bit more of a colorist kind of thing. There's a sort of thing, isn't there, about the core of the band, regardless of being the leader, but the core of the band being Keith and Charlie, kind of thing, and then all those later stories about, they would come in, they'd be sort of woozing and wobbling about, and all of a sudden something would click into place between them. There'd be a look and a bit of and then something would happen, kind of thing. And I wonder if that was already evident in a way. Do you think not? Do you think it's too early for that to be evident?
Yeah. I think
fair enough.
Yeah. I think too. I think Simon, and I can't prove it, but this is my own theory. Despite the fact that I'm a Rolling Stones nut, I think Andrew Loog Oldham picked Mick and Keith because they were better to work with. Brian Jones was an asshole. Yes. He was a very, very difficult. He was a mean person to a lot of people.
Yes, and what you want is, I suppose you want people who are a bit malleable, and you want people who are not going to be too difficult. And the two things you could say about Brian Jones is neither of those, was he?
Oh, respectful.
Had his own vision.
You know.
No, but got his own vision, got his own about what the band should be, and I think that vision is this very much, as you said earlier, very much that's Brian's vision, and that is the result of a year's touring of of the material they did, pretty much. Apparently the story about I Want to Be Your Man is that he was walking up a street in London, and by chance out of a taxi jumped Lennon and McCartney on their way home from Variety Club lunch. The boys asked Oldham why he was looking thoughtful. Oh, I'm fed up. The Stones can't find a song to record. Oh, we've got a song we've almost written. The Stones can record it if you like. So the song was I Want to Be Your Man. So they obviously went back with Oldham to the studio and finished writing the song. So I think that thing you were saying earlier, they already had quite a lot of the song already worked out, and they finished it in the studio. But nevertheless, it would have had a marked effect on Loog Oldham and the Stones about writing their own stuff.
Yeah, I can't speak for Andrew Loog Oldham. I haven't read his biography for a long time, but I know that Keith talks about that as being a pivotal point in his biography, that he was standing in front of guys who were his colleagues. That he wasn't in awe of them, because they were friends, but he makes a distinction about it's one thing to learn to play a guitar and to play a song and put your own signature on an existing song. That's one thing. That's one set of skills that him and Brian had. But to actually go and write a song, and if they hadn't have seen that process, they probably wouldn't have. I don't know, Simon. I like to think that maybe that was their YouTube.
Yeah.
That was. How do you write a song? You go on YouTube, and there's 50,000 people there to tell you how to do it.
Yeah, in many different ways. Yeah. No way of doing it before that. No, you just had to sort of divine it, didn't you, in some kind of way?
But those songs though that are on that album, if you guys haven't checked it out, I've got that on my rotation all the time. I'm a King Bee is just. It's amazing, Simon.
Yeah.
Can I get a witness?
Yeah. Hold on, yeah. I mean, my favorite thing is one of my favorite things is Route 66, which, if you listen to it, speeds up wildly after about 30 seconds. It's really funny. When I was just mucking about playing along to it, not that long ago. Because we do it in our little, Dave and I do it in our little, and like when you're playing along, you go, wait a minute, it's just sped up by about 30%. It's a Charlie seemingly. Oh, it's not fast enough. Come on, chaps. Let's inject a bit into this. It's funny. It's about me, which I you see, I love that sort of thing because I think that makes it real. That's a real thing, and then obviously. Not being able to go back and redo it all at the same speed. That was the take they've got. That's the take you had. That's the take they got. There's quite a lot of questions. I'll try and get some of the questions in there. Kubrick Lover, I used to have a Saturday bonus of records that I'd put aside during the week in my record shop days. And Tony would let me have a couple of 2 or 3 albums a week, which led to lots of things. Probably including this, to be honest. I think that it was great. I loved that job. It was really good fun. And Kubik Love says, wasn't the first album they actually wrote their own songs? Was this 65? One of them being Satisfaction. Well, I mean, they had
Aftermath was pretty much
yeah,
the
but
first album that they
on here they've
recorded
got,
that was all their own songs.
Yes, yeah. but yeah, even on here they're they've got Tell Me, which is obviously one of theirs. Not so they're writing from the first album a bit. I think it takes, as you just said, it takes time to understand how to write songs, doesn't it? And my guess is that period, going through the next couple of years, they probably wrote quite a lot of songs that they didn't do anything with, and trying to pick out the good ones, trying to pick out the ones that would stick, write songs for other people. So Kubrick Lover, the Brian Jones didn't he said he told her to shut up and bring on, wasn't it Howling Wolf, bring on Howling Wolf rather than Muddy Waters, but he did do that, yes. Yeah, Arvin, you're right. The Slim Harpo version is great as well, but lots of people done good versions of King Bee. But, some chat. So it's one of my favourites. I love the rock and roll element to it. I think that, as you say, the balance between Keith and Brian is perfectly illustrated on the record. I think it's a picture of them live. What they were doing live at that time, their evolution as a kind of as a blues band, has a very much a blues heart from Brian, but with a bit of extra rock and roll from Keith, doing Route 66 and Carol. Things obviously simple. So it's one of my favourite. I hope for Dave isn't here to pick me up on whether it's to give me a good telling off for my choice of blues records, like he did with the Led Zeppelin one.
Yeah, I think it's again it's a statement too about the Rolling Stones. It's a product certainly of 1964. We've made comment about drugs and alcohol and the rock and roll lifestyle and how that's had an influence with a band or with an album. I'm glad that you mentioned Route 66 because that's clearly a raver. And I didn't know what a raver was until, I was in my early 20s when I was reading a couple of guitar magazines and some books, that, speed, was a big thing, that a lot of young people were taking, they were taking, they were taking uppers, and so they'd go to, and they were called raves, so they'd go and, drink some lager or some, it's
very much a mod thing. That's speed. Purple Hearts is very mod.
And then stand in front of the band and jump up and down. And so obviously the band's got to play something for these kids to rave to, So very much a product of 1964. But what I like about it though is the reverence. Clearly the reverence that these British guys have for these blues cats, we've said it before again, Simon. I keep harping on about it. I'm sorry, but they put their own stamp. They put their own stamp on it, but it's there's no bones about it. Half those songs are blues albums, blues songs. Respectful.
Sorry.
No problem.
I agree. I agree completely with that, and I think that it is that mixture of putting your own stamp on it, but having great respect for the source, and also further that promoting the source, talking about it, promoting it, being publicly with that Brian Jones comment we were talking about earlier, publicly supporting those guys, taking them on tour, going to record at Cheshire, they have, they all had an understanding about the importance of those, Muddy Waters and Howling Wolf and Willie Dixon and all those guys in, what they were doing, and that wish to promote them, I think that, that the one thing we could say is that all these, the tracks are attributed to the people who wrote them.
Yeah.
So Route 16, I Will Just Want to Make Love to You is attributed to Willie Dixon because it's written by Willie Dixon, and that, that means that Willie Dixon must have got some money from it. I would assume in some way, shape, or form, he would have done it. I think that. So I think the thing, the other thing I say is that, for me, just going back to what I said earlier about the album cover, that it, your first record, not having your name on the sleeve. Now I don't know how he persuaded Decca that it would be a good idea not to have the debut record of your band with no name on it. Just, I probably didn't want Decca on it either, but obviously it's on the spine, but it's not. Good Morning, Deja Voodoo. It's that's some bold statement, isn't it? That picture is a great picture, by the way, fantastic picture. No name, you to put that out, you've got to have some, some sort of yeah, he does now. Yes, Hubert Lover, he does. But just look at the sleeve notes. The Rolling Stones are more than just a group; they're a way of life that's captured the imagination of the nation's teenagers and made them one of the most sought after groups in beatdom. Beatdom, they are. To kind of write that as a thing for your first album, I think is really, it makes a tremendously bold, image and stuff, and so I think it's really hats off to him for having that, and I presume it was him that persuaded Decca not, to just have. The second one's very similar, isn't it? The second album's very, very similar sleeve to it, but obviously that one was taken by David Bailey, not like this one, recorded by Nicholas Wright, but similar thing. So I think that that kind of makes it a, dare I use the word, iconic album, because of that's an iconic image in many ways. Such a strong image of the band, what they're about. So I think it's really bold, and I really like that as a bold statement of what they are and what they want to do.
And playing cheap instruments too. This is before they're playing.
This is before Fenders and all of that.
Before they're playing Telecasters, they're playing Meteors, they're playing 3 Vox amps. The bass that Bill Wyman's playing is a homemade bass that he made himself. Charlie Watts is playing a drum set that he's had for about 5 years. Apparently, that was old as the hills, but he looked after the skins. Obviously, that's the important part of the drums. But I don't know anything about the production of that album. Other than you're right, Simon. I think it was recorded live, basically. But
pretty much,
I hate making these comparisons, but I think you have to. In 1964, you compare that album to the first Beatles album or the second Beatles album, and you've got chalk and cheese. You've got Daylight and Darkness. It's just so different.
Oh, completely, yes, and I think that's right, and I think it's there is a difference stylistically, and there's a difference in sort of mood and all sorts of things. You know, you're right. The Beatles are very, if you like, a very sunny group, aren't they? It's sunny, upbeat. I want to hold you, you know, and that, you know, is is really important. Whereas I don't think, you know, you can see that the Stones on this is something. It's not that at all, is it? You know, some of it's rock and roll, as you say, kind of
Chicago blues, Simon.
as
It's very good.
befits Chicago blues, yeah. You know,
Yeah,
but befits. You know, if you're doing live, you want
Yep.
some faster songs that people will dance to, don't you?
Yep.
So you know, something like Route 66 is really good. You know, it's so so I think you're right. There is a marked difference between that and and the Beatles' first album. I mean, I absolutely think that's quite right. You know, and even then you can see the difference between the two things, can't you? As you know, difference between the two bands.
Yeah. And
which is
and having said that, though, we don't jump on the bandwagon saying which is better or who do you prefer or anything like that. We're just pointing out, Simon, you know, the difference between them, because clearly they were and you know, marketed differently. But before the marketing, let's just remember the music. You listen to Please Please Me and this album, and it's just you know, wow.
and of course, one of the major differences is that 3/4 of it are originals. 3/4 of the first Beatles album is still originals. You know, there's a couple of covers, Boys and and the Arthur Alexander song, but actually, most of it, or a lot of it, is you know, they're written by 50% are written by them, which is interesting, and not kind of blues things as well. I'm thinking Jerry Goffin and Carole King, which is much more kind of a Tin Pan Alley kind of pop world, isn't it? Rather than that, which I think is interesting. And you're right, coming at it from a different angle, coming from a different place than that kind of what you might call that deep blues thing that the Stones obviously bought into in much way. And we've discussed that, haven't you? The difference between the kind of the blues thing that the Rolling Stones were into, that kind of London curated, quite serious, coming out of jazz blues thing that you know, they were into. Clapton, John Mayall, all those guys. You know, they're quite serious. Whereas the Beatles, you know, and that the classic question, isn't it? You know, why aren't there any blues bands who come from Liverpool?
Yeah, rock and roll.
Because they're rock and roll bands. You know, with the Beatles doing the Star Club, they are playing rock and roll.
Yeah,
and I think there is a difference between rock and roll and blues. You know, and they wouldn't be doing "I'm a King Bee" and things like that. It might be doing Route 66, but
yeah, I think we have to also remember too that the Beatles had a head start on the Rolling Stones. You know, this is something that I again never realised right through my 10 years. You know, because I was always, you know, always enjoyed the comparisons between the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, but it wasn't until later on, I think, until I read Norman's book, you know, and really thought about the fact that the Beatles had been playing together, well, the core of the Beatles, Simon, since 58. You know, the Rolling Stones only started hanging out together, in 63, you know, so, you know, the Beatles had 360 gigs under their belt.
62. Well, that's right, yeah, and you're absolutely right. That kind of that thing of going back 2 or 3 years, even, you know, that playing in Star Club in Hamburg. You know, obviously the Stones never did that, and you're right, and that you know, they were definitely behind the Beatles in that, and in the bands that were pulled along by the Beatles, I would guess.
Boy, did they catch up.
What? Completely, yeah. Oh, they caught up, all right. No worries about that. But,
well, and I'd, you know, jeepers, and overtook them. You know, yeah.
But yes, I mean, you are right, and it is interesting that that you know that that forming in 60 and not 62, that 2 year difference, and obviously, you know, McCartney, Lennon, Harrison playing even before that,
Yeah.
you know, playing in you know, in 58, and then playing in the, you know, going to the Star Club in Hamburg and going to Hamburg a few times and doing, even with Pete Best, you know, still gives you, you know, probably 4 or 5 years actually in front of the Stones.
So
in terms of evolution.
How far is Brian Jones's town from London? Cheltenham.
Okay,
Is that-
Cheltenham is
Is that
about
far from London?
Cheltenham's about 50 miles from me, so it's on the same side of the country as I am in the West Country. It's a little bit further north.
Okay.
It's probably 90 miles from London. But in the UK, that 90 miles would be like going to a different era, a different place, like going to Narnia almost. You know, I mean, Cheltenham's a very kind of genteel spa town. You know, so it's built into quite a lot of Georgian buildings, which is like the 1790s, 1780s, 1790s, 1800. So it's kind of, you know, a lot of the buildings are 200 years old, built around a spa, so probably more ancient than that. And, you know, a kind of, yes, you know, in those days, a kind of, you know, a sort of country town, really. You know,
wasn't it interesting though, from a perspective with Brian Jones, like his father was a scientist? Wasn't there some military laboratory there or something like?
The biggest employer in Cheltenham is something called GCHQ, which is basically the spy network, where, you know, employs a lot of people there. So, you know, government, you know, Secret Service type of stuff.
So Brian's 15 years old and he's jumping on a bus or hitching into London, Simon, to catch hold of that blues scene that's growing, that trad. Sorry, not the trad jazz. That the modern jazz scene that's happening. So he's leaving London for 2 days when he's 16, 17 years old, and then coming home. That's that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I think it is. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing because obviously you had to do. People did then. People hitchhiked. You know, when was the last time I saw? I can't remember the last time I saw a hitchhiker. Somebody on the side of the road with their thumb at him. It doesn't happen
anymore. No,
anymore at all. You know, and then in those days, you probably went down the A40. There was probably a road that went from Cheltenham to London, sort of directly, the A40. So you could go all the way there, which is an advantage. Quite a lot of young people would hitchhike and stuff like that. And it's just, I think some of it is about, you know, the times, you know, the fact that, you know, people who were 16 or 17 then, 18, you know, they were looking out. They were looking, you know, they probably heard about the scene in London. They knew about the Beatles, you know. Therefore, you know, if you, and I'm sure Brian would have read about it, you know, he'd seen bands and things that came from London. And therefore knew that London was the sort of, you know, the mecca for this. And, you know, 96 miles to get to a thing, well, you know, so, you know, 2 or 3 hours in a car. You could probably do it in a long day. You know, go down, start hitchhiking at 8, get there for sort of lunchtime, start hitchhiking at 6, get back for 10, kind of thing.
Well, you know, it fascinates me that this young guy was doing that, and he was going to London, and he was hanging out with Alexis Corner and these guys at the Ealing Club, and he was soaking all this stuff in. So obviously, he must have been pleasant enough and respectful enough at that age, you know, to be allowed into the clubs at a young age, you know, and you know, and he must have been pretty good because, you know, he would have stood there and said, "I'm a guitar player," and they said, "Okay, show us your chops," and he would have showed them a couple of, "Okay, all right then, come in then, all right, you know, so you can sit around and hang with us." So, yeah, fascinating that, you know, that Brian caught that bug early and learnt those lessons, Simon, because if he hadn't have learnt that lesson and passed those lessons on himself to the rest of the Rolling Stones, we wouldn't have had the Rolling Stones.
No, and I think it's also interesting that that it took somebody not from London to do it.
Mm.
I think there's a thing there, isn't it? That without somebody, to be cliched about it, pulled by the streets of paved with gold kind of thing.
Sure.
That. But that it is interesting that pull from somebody from a small town, a reasonable town, in the west of England, gets pulled and gets those guys and then with those London guys and forms a band with them, gets them into his orbit and forms a band with them. And I think sometimes it does take somebody with a vision who doesn't fit in. The one thing we say about Brian Jones is he was an outsider.
Sure,
had his own view of it, and
sure,
and people like that with strong views about where they should be going, what they should be doing, I think is a really important part of the Rolling Stones getting together. He went down. He saw. Here we go. Yeah. See, interestingly, that I'll just have a look on the map while we're talking. Cheltenham to Ealing. Ealing is just off the A40, which is the road to Cheltenham. So it's quite easy, and Ealing's in West London, so it's further out. It's not in Central London. So if you were going to Ealing Club, it's probably easier to get to from Cheltenham than almost anywhere else. To be honest, it's.
Well, apparently he used to crash there too,
Yeah, I'm sure.
And and people looked after him. So, interesting, fascinating that he had the ability to do that. And again, we've spoken about this at length many times. He had the ability and the foresight to hear this music that he was listening to on the original records, work out the chord structures, give the chords, show Mick and show Keith how to do it. As much as Keith was a pretty good guitar player, to be fair, Simon, Brian showed him how to play.
And that's a really interesting point, isn't it? That that Brian showed him not only how to play, but we think that he showed him about open tunings and stuff, didn't we?
Yeah.
We think that actually that came from Brian and not from Ry Cooder, which is Keith's version of it slightly.
Yeah.
We think that Keith's version is kind of not quite that. But you're right. I mean, I think that not only but mixing with those guys like as you say, like Alexis Corner, like John Whale down at Ealing, the clubs in Ealing, the Blues Club, where they did Eagle Pie Island or whatever, and is it the railway in Ealing? Yes, it is. And then hitching up with those guys, but being able to show them stuff that he'd obviously got from those other guys, those older guys, didn't he? From going to those clubs and watching it, and then being able to translate it, remember it, because there's no writing it down much. You've got to remember it, write it down, and then you've got to be able to show somebody else how to do it. Yes, that kind of the teaching, the mentoring bit of Keith by Brian, I think is a really important part of their development.
So can I ask you this question? The Beatles recorded their first album. It took them 12 hours. They recorded the first album in 12 hours. How long did it take the Stones to record their first album?
Well, it took them about a week because they went into the studio and as I just described earlier, they went in and they had because it was cheap. They had a bit more time and I think probably what they did is they seemingly most of them pretty much first take songs, but I think they had a bit of time to work them up in the studio, and kind of just hone them down, and then they would record them.
Okay, so that week was squeezed in sessions, was it? What was it more like we've got 2 hours here, come in and record a song there? Was it that kind of scenario, Simon?
I think so, yeah. But I mean, it says here they took 4 days to record their album. 2 days at the beginning of January, 2 days at the end of February. So pretty much
Gosh,
live in the studio. Not
pretty
many
quick,
overdubs. Yeah. Still pretty
No.
quick, but still a bit longer because obviously the studio was a lot cheaper than than say working in Decca Studios. Less beholden to Decca. But obviously less beholden then to them running up a large bill with Decca for studio time, kind of thing. But
Okay, well, I mean this respectfully. When I ask you, so I mean this respectfully when I ask you this question, okay? Because I love both bands. So we know that the Beatles recorded
Please me.
No. Oh, shake it up, baby. Twist and
Shout.
Shout.
Oh, Twist and Shout. Yeah.
One take. 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So how many takes do you think the Rolling Stones made on some of their songs? Do you think any of those songs are one take songs on that album, Simon?
I think most of them are one take songs. And what I've read is that they were recording on 2-track stereo, but there wasn't enough money for retakes. So basically, what they laid down was what they got. So they're pretty much all one take songs.
So when I say one take, I should call it. So how many times do you think they rehearsed the song before they recorded?
Well, I think there's 2 levels of that. One, they played them live for at least a year, yeah, because it's their live set. And 2, I guess that they would have run through them a few times in the studio before they pressed the record button. So I think it's not, in a sense, not the first take of them ever playing it, but I think it's what they got themselves in a position where everyone knew the arrangement, what they were going to do, and then they did it, and everyone knew what they were going to play. So in a sense, they're arranged, in the best possible way, but you still get that live, zip to them because they're playing together as a unit, as a band, and they're recording all in one go. So it's hardly any overdubs really on it at all. It's pretty much what you see is what you get. So I think
I think the Stones probably got a bit of a heads up there too on the Beatles, because they would have been part of that process too. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs. We all know that first and second album, the Beatles had nothing to do with the recording at all, But I think because they were friends with Andrew, I think Andrew may have invited them into the control, but I think they may have seen that whole process a lot closer, Simon, than the Beatles did.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that absolutely that someone like George Martin and the engineers would be doing the thing, and George Martin would be recording it, and he'd have a vision about how it's going to sound and all this. Whereas I think you're right, with the Stones, it's much more. They don't really have a producer, so they've got an engineer. They've got Andrew Loog Oldham as the producer, but Andrew Loog Oldham's not really got a massive amount of experience for producing a record, so he's feeling his way. So therefore, you're right. They get in they probably run through it, get then go back in the control room and listen to it and go, has it got it? And then it's a case of balancing it into Mark. Hey, Mitch, thanks for joining, mate. Get some sleep, indeed. Yeah, you don't have to work anymore, but you still have to go to sleep. You lucky. So congratulations on your retirement, and have a lovely sleep.
Happy birthday too for last week as well.
Oh, was it happy birthday? Oh, Mitch, well, happy birthday for last week. I missed that. But, yeah. So and thanks for dropping by. It's been really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So I think
And
that, that going back to the point that absolutely it's a bit more of a collaborative approach in deciding, whether it was good,
yeah,
and stuff, And as I say, the engineer's job would be to make it sound good, because in those days, obviously, sorry, early mornings, that pretty much, what you recorded is then what you had as a sound. Almost pretty much all the effects are pre-recording, aren't they? So in effect, what you've got on tape, you're not then going back and reamping and stuff, and
no,
I'll put some drive on that and this, that, like we do now.
yeah,
It's very much once you recorded it, then it's recorded, and that's the sound you've got. So anything you're going to do has to be pre that. Hence the penchant for overdriven amps and other types of guitars, because it has more of an effect if you're doing nothing post tape. So I think that yes, you're right. There is more of a collaboration. There is a greater sense of collaboration, a greater sense of as a group of people saying, was that working? Is that what we sound like? Is that it? Does that got a verve and a zip to it? Especially if you're, as we said earlier, especially as what you're doing is recording your live set, and a bit like the Beano album, really, which is how to record yourself, as if you were playing live, kind of thing. But and there's two things there, isn't there? One is you either go in the studio and you make a record that's a studio thing, and maybe you do overdubs and other things like that, or you're kind of representing and you have songs that you take in. And I think the Beatles are more there, aren't they? Because they, those songs that they wrote for those albums would have been written for those albums. They wouldn't have done massive amounts of touring with them. They would have gone in the studio, worked them out, and then played them. Yes, with George Martin.
yeah.
George Martin would have, worked out what the sounds were going to be, what they were going to do, whether they were going to do you only got 4 tracks if you're lucky, so lots of overdubbing is not really a possibility. But
I admire those British cats and the way they recorded, because if you read Mick Jagger's comments about those first couple of albums, and again Keith Richards' comments, they say that album is what they were sounding like live back then, and it's the same thing with the Beatles. The Beatles, George Martin wanted that first album, that second album, to sound as good as they were live. He heard them live. In fact, they wanted to record live at the Cavern Club, as you know. And what's really interesting about these guys, the reason why they wanted to catch their live sound is because they were getting caught up in that energy of that music, Simon. They wanted to translate this energy that was coming through, that was a little bit different from the production of the songs, some of those pop songs beforehand. So, I take my hat off to those English guys and the way that they were strategically locating mics. I think that's probably the most technical thing that the engineers were probably doing back then. How far do we place this mic, Simon, from the bass amp?
Yeah. Because it's all an experiment. It's all,
Hey, Sonia.
and all those. Hi, Sonia. How you doing? I hope you're good, safe and well. No, I think you're right, and I think that that the new younger people coming through who maybe wanted to push the needle into the red, work out where to put things differently. How do you record? How do you record so I sound like I do live? And I wish. So I think you're right. I think it's that it all plugs into that period of experimentation, of things opening up, trying to find ways of doing things more creatively in a way that hadn't been done before. And it all taps into the same thing. And those guys, they get in a studio with Andrew Lou Golden, who's a young guy, one of the new breed, and it's what's our vision, what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, and obviously recording your live set isn't. We've got limited money and we've got limited time. Therefore, the thing to do is to do. You're not going to sit in there and do 6 months of jamming to get some songs. What you do is you go in what you've already got, don't you? What you've already honed, and you say, I'm going to put out an album that will be familiar to the audience that's seen us live if we've been touring, which I think is not a bad creative marketing, move. They'll know, they will have seen the songs, therefore they know the album, therefore you can get away with not having the name, although you've got it in bloody big letters on the back. That actually that's a pretty good marketing ploy for your first record. That if you've toured, which the Stones had, honed it all down, then what you do is you sell to your audience what you've been doing live, because and it's proof, isn't it? I mean, that first album sold 100,000 copies, which is
yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, Andrew would have been like all the other managers at that time too, Simon. How long is this band going to hang around for? Let's get an album out, sell 100,000 copies, Simon, because the Stones could be old hat next week. Because there were a lot of bands, as we've discussed on these shows over the last couple of years, there were a lot of bands that came and went quickly, a lot of bands, and even the Beatles themselves, even in 64 at the height of, they themselves were going, shit, how long can this last for, Simon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. So it's yes, absolutely, Arvin. That's right. You see, just EQing everything on one track at once.
Yeah.
And whatever you got, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Just geniuses, eh? Just. I just take my head off to the. when you go on YouTube and watch these producers now sitting there for months on end behind these huge bloody consoles that look like, yeah.
Oh, it's like everything, isn't it? The technology has evolved. You couldn't do Sgt. Pepper's on the technology they had in 1963.
No.
You couldn't do that because it's just not possible. Well, you could, but it would have to be live. You'd have to do it. You'd have to be recording it live, and people did record with orchestras and stuff like that. And things, there was you'd come up to the microphone to do your solo and then back away again, kind of thing. There's all that going on, but you just made do with what you've got, didn't you? In that classic way. What have I got? And in a sense, I'm sure I've said this on here before, that those very restrictions, that restrictive, makes you more, is an aid to creativity. To have, this vast, vista of you can do anything you want, I don't necessarily think that's an aid to creativity. That's an aid to not getting anywhere, and I think, that you can see that with the Stones, that when they get to the 70s, and you've got 24 tracks that and they've got loads of money, that what do? They go in the studio for months and, and kind of use the studio to kind of work up ideas and things. That's a different way of working. It's fine, but it's a different way of working. You can afford to do it, keeping loads of people in in employment. That's fine. But it's a different creative process. It's much more kind of letting it come when it comes and hanging around.
Yeah. And to be fair, Simon, too, the Rolling Stones used those recording sessions as bloody holidays. They were kicking back and, to be fair, they were recording one day and partying for 5 and then recovering for 4.
But well, indeed. But even if you think, we talked on here recently about Derek and the Dominoes. How long did Derek and the Dominoes take to record?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And that's in 60 whatever, 69, 70, whatever it was. But that's 70 years is like 7 or 8 years later. You're still going in and you're still recording an album in 2 weeks.
Yep.
By going in, being focused, getting organised, and getting on with it and doing it. It's a bit of
another genius. Tom Dowd, another genius.
The great Tom Dowd. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And those, absolutely. And and I think that yes, yeah, but you know, somebody who understood how to then capture that stuff and deal with it. Still the same way. Yeah, it's the technology's moved on, but you know that thing about, and you've probably got a bit more at your disposal in terms of reverb and other bits and
Yep.
pieces you could do. Yeah, but it's still much more, you know, much as much the you know the pre-recording bit that.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite song? Is there a favorite track?
To be honest, I think Route 66 is my favourite. It's the one I play. I think, yeah. I know it's the first one we play it in our band, so it's. I think that they are. That's proof of what the favourite is. It's the one we play in our band. That's the one I'm going to choose.
For me, it's a tough one, but I'm going to pick I'm a King Bee. You know, I just you know the guitaring that is just that. Oh my gosh, you know, and the cheeky way that Mick is singing. You know, just phenomenal, just unbelievably good. You know, I just and I yeah. The good thing about it too, Simon, is that half those songs too, you've got guys and girls in the UK and in the Commonwealth and in America shortly playing those songs in their garages with other people too. You know, you've got that translation happening quickly. Wow, this is pretty good. We can play this.
I mean, so I was just while you were thinking, no, I mean, agree. I was just thinking about that about Tom Dowd. I was thinking that, of course, the great advantage about Tom Dowd, George Martin, is that they had been producing for a long time before, you know, through all the 50s. You know, Tom Dowd is born in 25, so you know he's 20 and 45, so he's 30 and 55. You know, so he's got, you know, if he's been working in the record industry, he's been maybe 10 years in it, before 1955. So when he gets to, you know, so he's learned all those techniques of how to record straight onto 2-track, live, you know, running it all through. So when somebody comes and says, haha, I want to do this, you know, he says, yeah, fine, I can do all of that. I've done 30 years experience of how to record a band in that way, put it all up, got myself sorted out. Off we go. 2 weeks. Thank you very much. You know, and probably gives you time to, you know, if you're a good band, they're all good bands. You're really good. You know that you're not doing many takes. I mean, I think it's one of the. If you're recording for 2 weeks solidly, you're in a studio every day. That the actual number of times you do a take is probably not that many. Yeah. You know, you run it through, you get it, and then once you've got it, you know, and you're happy that there aren't too many great clangy mistakes or you have to do something with, actually, you can then use that for a bit of overdubbing creativity, you know. Oh, I need a solo there, I need to do that. Let's work something out, you know. So Dwayne and Eric can work something out and, you know, do something as an overdub kind of thing. So it does give you, you know, by being working smart and fast like that for all the basic stuff, gives you a chance, even within those fairly short timescales, to do some other stuff. Overdub, you know, some horns or maybe some strings, maybe some, you know, guitar parts and things like that. So I think, you know, but it's all about
I like the way that you
focus.
link that in. I like the way that you link the technology and you know, and the fact that these guys have got their hands wet, you know, over a period of time. But there's also the fact that these guys are just really, they have to be really good communicators, Simon. So while they're dealing with all this technology, you know, this technical side, this engineering side of the business, they're dealing with people that might have issues. You know, someone's chasing someone's missus, and someone's, you know, turned up. You know, so you're dealing with all these different, you know, and then having to manage that too. Jeepers.
Indeed, and I think that that's kind of my point about it, is that, you know, that if you're Andrew Loog Oldham, you're one of the gang, yeah?
Big time, yeah.
You know, whereas if you're George Martin, Tom Dowd, you're not one of the gang because you're a lot. But what you've done is you've recorded, you know, jazzers who are, you know, probably off their heads and quite difficult, and all of those things. Yes, he certainly did. Great Vanzini. He had a hit with Route 66, but you know that, and that gives you, you know, that kind of necessary gravitas to say, focus, guys, come on, you know, because you're older than they are, but you've been through it all. I don't think you know. It doesn't say you haven't. You know, it doesn't say you haven't had to deal with difficult people in the. You know, if you Tom Dowden, you started maybe in the late 40s.
Yeah.
You know that you haven't. That those difficult people didn't exist before 1963 or Brian Jones or whatever. You know, I mean, the jazz world will be littered with difficult people who are difficult to work with, unreliable. You know, and things, and having to work your way around that. So that, you know, having to work quickly. But you know, I think it is a tremendous, and you know, understanding the technology, keeping up with the technology to a certain extent. But actually, I read somewhere I can't remember where it was. I read a great account of Roy Orbison, recording Roy Orbison, Pretty Woman, yeah. You know, and the two key points about that. One key point was that came out of the article was that all the production was pre-recording. So basically, the recording bit was just purely about levels, making sure that things didn't distort, making sure that things, you know, went cleanly onto the tape. All the sound was out in the studio, and then when you press the button, count in, that's what you were going to get. You know, whatever the sound was, you know, pretty much in the room. Have loads of mics and all of that. You know, hi Vintage Sounds, how you doing? And I think that, you know, the other famous thing about Pretty Woman is at the beginning it goes da 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 da, and you know why he does that. You know why he does it at the beginning? Because he forgot riff. He forgot it. So only played half of it. They played half again, and they said, "Well, that's brilliant. Fine, we'll keep it." So it's actually one of those great mistakes that has become, you know, just part of the thing. That you just forgot. But of course, that didn't matter. You know, when you went back and listened to it, you went, "Well, that's great," you know. But it's a mistake. Well, it don't matter. You know, who's gonna know? If I don't tell you, who's gonna know? It just sounds like you played the first half and then you played the whole thing. You know, and that sounds like an arrangement thing because he did it twice. And when you do it twice, it's not a mistake; it's deliberate. You know, as a thing. So I think that yes, that kind of, you know, that kind of production thing and you know, keeping it moving, but really important for you know, those
awesome.
more important in those early days of recording. So I think, you know, that's and I think, you know, that's what the Stones did. You know, booked into that, whack it out, and then, you know, people will buy it on the grounds that I've seen the Stones, and they, they know what they're getting in a sense, you know, which is in a marketing sense that's always good, you know. So, you know, that's why it sold 100,000 advance copies, because, you know, if you've seen the Stones, you've seen them do Route 66, and then you go and you find out the album's coming out, and you know what the track is. Oh yes, that'll be what they do live. You know, I know that song. I've heard them play it. Therefore, you know, as I say, familiarity is a great thing in selling, isn't it? You know, I know what I'm getting, and I think you can't underestimate that in a sales sense, can you? Which is why I think I sold so many.
Well, I appreciate you giving us that presentation, Simon, on your second album. Now, there was a question in the chat early on, so that's your second album. The first album I gave Great Vanzini was the collection of 3 CD set that Fleetwood Mac did. Now, that was a couple of shows ago, but we've had a couple of other shows in between. We've had the Peter Green tribute show, and last week we had Great Vanzini. So, look, guys, I've got to shoot off. I've got some family business I have to sort out. So we've been on the air for an hour and a half. So I look forward to to next week's show. If you guys in the chat weren't aware of it, at the top of the show, Simon and I made an announcement that we're going to have Guitar Hack. Now, part of my presentation next week for my second album is the Beano album. And instead of
giving it away.
and instead of discussing the album, because we've done that a few times, Guitar Hack's going to come on and we're going to talk about some technical stuff, Gibson guitars, Les Pauls, Marshall amps, and how we go about trying to get a Beano sound over the years from playing budget to Gibsons and Les Pauls. So I look forward to that. If you guys can join Simon and I next week. Vintage Sounds, sorry that you've just jumped into the tail end of the show.
Sorry, Vintage Sounds. Yes, arrived for the coda.
Yeah.
You bought a ticket from a ticket tout. 6 songs from the end.
So we've got an intro video to the shows. So we're going to try, after Simon signed off and we've waved off, we're going to try and play that intro video on our outro, which we're trying to get ticky here. So hopefully it's going to go all right.
Technology. So let's hope it does. We'll find out. Yes, but yes. Otherwise, there'll be silence or you and I laughing.
So we'll probably go for about 2 hours next week, Simon. If Hack's going to be on. Normally, when we have a third wheel, we normally sort of go to just over 2 hours.
You suggesting, my son John? Yeah, no, that's fine. It's only 8:07 in the UK, so if Hack, if you want to go half an hour earlier, if you want to get, I'm happy to get up. I'm on holiday next week.
I said that to him, but he said no. He's keen to do
cool,
normal. Yeah. Okay. So no. So
okay, it's fine. Cool.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, look forward to having Hack on. He's always tremendous value. So that'll be good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should say thank you to everybody. Thanks to Kubrick Lover, Vintage Sounds, the great Vanzini, of course. Sonia, thanks Sonia, and Arvin as well. Mitch Heyman, who's hopefully asleep by now. Mickey Settlemeyer, thanks for dropping by, guys. It's been really good. Deja Voodoo, I'll say that twice, doesn't matter. I think that's probably got, and Guitar Hack as well was in at the beginning. So thanks all for dropping by. It's been really good and contributing. Really nice. And stay safe for the week. Stay safe and well. And we'll see you next Sunday.
Next week.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Take care, all. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. So hang around. Watch the end of the show. Bye-bye. See you guys later.